All right, welcome back. In our last video, I attempted to work through the relationship triangle with you, and we'll see how your feedback will give me a sense of whether that worked or not for you. This next section is going to be the science, the chemistry behind love. And I think this is so fascinating. Whether it's adult relationships or teenage relationships, we need to understand infatuation. We want to understand it. And we also want to understand how do we love and how do we bond with people. And these are the three chemicals that we're going to be discussing in the next little while. So dopamine. Most people have heard of dopamine, especially as it relates to addiction and how it can get hijacked because dopamine is a values neutral hormone. It doesn't tell you if what feels good is a good idea or not, right? It just feels good. Like me in a giant bag of Miss Vickie's potato chips. Not just any kind, but, specifically sour cream, sweet chili and sour cream. So once I start a little bit, I'm like, that tastes so good. I just want to eat the whole thing, even though my stomach hurts afterwards. It's like, oh, maybe I should have had a little bag. There's just something about dopamine that keeps us saying, let's do it again. We want more. It activates the pleasure and reward circuits, and it releases from stressful situations, which gives us a desire to repeat the experience. When we talked about pornography in our section on media influences, this is also a hijacking situation. When a technique essentially by pornography, dopamine in social media, in the phone, like it's now documented facts that dopamine sets us up sometimes to continue in a behavior even when it turns out that it's not good for us. It just relieves the stress enough, whether it's eating too much food, whether it's gambling, whether it's drinking, whether it's drugs, whatever, it creates that little bit of escapism for a moment, but it can, depending on personalities, depending on the, what it was, fentanyl is so quick to grab people's addictive cycles that sometimes all it takes is one experience and they're completely caught in it. So dopamine is this wonderful watch out for chemical. And as you head down the physical line of progression, if it's with somebody that you like to be with, it feels good to get a hug. We've all had hugs, right, at a family reunion where we were uncomfortable. Nope, I didn't want, no. And so we didn't get dopamine at that moment. If we don't want to hug somebody and we're forced into a hug, then it actually creates a little bit of like a small T trauma. Now, if somebody experiences sexual abuse, that is a capital T trauma. And so it's not a feel-good moment. Now, sometimes if somebody's been groomed, it can create confusion because something feels good, but they're feeling traumatized at the same time. So there's a lot of confusion in that. So as you head down the physical line of progression, the dopamine just continues to get more and more and more. The greatest dump of dopamine a person can get in the physical intimacy would be in a sexual experience. Unfortunately, again, pornography is training people for dangerous, unhealthy, demoralizing intimacy. Well, I can't even call it intimacy, really. Being close to somebody, I guess that is a form of intimacy. And so a person doesn't necessarily get dopamine when they're having sex. So it needs to be a respectful, mutual experience, even within marriage. I think I need to say that because sometimes people just make assumptions. So dopamine's pretty powerful. And what we need to understand about it is we get it in response to excitement, pleasure, new things, adventure, risk-taking, and of course, addictive drugs. So these would be just some of the few things that it does. What's helpful to understand is during the teen years, dopamine drops by half. And there's an increase in the release amount. So when you do experience it, it's like, whoa, but the things that made you really excited when you were a child, like think of Christmas, or think of finding a stick on a road. You're 5 years old. Mom, look, a stick, woo! And at 15, generally speaking, not as many 15-year-olds are grabbing a stick going, Mom, look at this. Doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means it's not the general view simply because the dopamine levels have dropped. And what this looks like on a slide would be right here. The top would be the excitation of dopamine. Do you see how as a child it's so high, but how the biggest drop is during the teen years, and then it levels out? Okay. The bottom part is the inhibition. So when we talk about inhibition, what this really is related to is the prefrontal cortex, the last part of our brain to develop. And the functions of the prefrontal cortex are pretty essential to be able to survive in life. It's part of the frontal lobe right behind our forehead. And the prefrontal cortex is generally developed between the ages of 25 and 30. It doesn't mean it's not there, it just means it's not fully attached. And so if somebody is using their advisors in life just from their peer pool, and that peer pool is under the age of 25 to 30, they are actually asking a lot from them because that group is not able to give the same kind of wisdom and experience that somebody with a fully developed prefrontal cortex would. The prefrontal cortex is essentially, neuroscientists will call it like our braking mechanism to stop and think about what we're doing right now. Hey, is what I'm doing right now gonna get me to where I want? Which is why I consistently ask the question, what do you want in relationships? I'm not assuming it's the same as everybody else's. And what are you willing to do to get it? Because it's going to take some stopping and thinking about things, not just kind of like, well, this feels good or this might feel good. So essentially, it's not like you're at war with them, but the excitation of dopamine dropping when you're at a stage in teen years going, wow, things are just not as exciting anymore. Combine that with the lower self-control that you're going to have if you practice it. We've all met people over the age of 30 that are like, they have no self-control. So they have not, even though their prefrontal cortex may be attached, they've trained their brain to react instead of stop and think. So that disparity between in the teen years is the highest at that point when you're making often adult decisions, right? Like it's such a great disparity, and there's a desire to experience and feel things like and to try risky things. And that's why there are so many classes that in the average school will be filled with the police coming in and saying, okay, here's the dangers of drugs, here's the dangers of smoking, here's the dangers of anything that will hijack a teenager's brain. It doesn't mean an adult can't be addicted. It does mean that the younger a person develops an addiction, the more difficult it is to get rid of that addiction in later years. So there's a vulnerability to our teen years that we have to, if we don't acknowledge, we're not able to make the appropriate decisions. I do think this knowledge can make us really, it can set us up to make some smart choices in the future, and to understand that our dopamine in our brain is saying, just do it, like, yeah, go ahead, and the prefrontal cortex is saying, whoa, just a minute, let's think about that. And you can tell it's not an anxiety thing. It's just like, let me consider all the factors. And again, having people in your life who believe in you, want the best for you, who you can trust and respect to help you make great choices is, you're so ahead of the pack when you're able to have that in your life and not consulting the media. Because frankly, as wonderful as the media can be, they don't know you. People on social media, they don't know you. They can't say this is best for you. And again, their bottom line, even in social media, is money. So not saying they're bad people, it's just not the same as somebody who actually knows you. So dopamine, making those decisions is really a factor. Understanding that in teen years, your levels of testosterone are just skyrocketing, and women get only 1/10 to 1/20th of the amount that guys get. So again, the stronger the feeling, and testosterone is connected to the sex drive, the stronger the feeling, the more important it is to stop and just think about it. Okay, I want to do this. This feels good. This looks good. Is this a good idea though? Long term, for what I really want, not just in the short term. So that's a little bit about dopamine and the testosterone that goes up for both guys and girls, but for guys much more. These bonding hormones, This is what was the determining factor for me taking my job 12 years ago. When I read about them and began to unpackage the effects on our relationship, I was like, where has this been? And of course, with MRI scans and PET scans, that's where they've been. And so grateful for that technology that's enabled us to understand that oxytocin is such a powerful bonding hormone that neuroscientists will describe it like superglue, thus the superglue icon there. And if you've ever had an experience with superglue, that's not been a positive one, it's because you've attached superglue to things that you didn't want attached, and it's difficult to get them off. And once you do get them off, it might be either painful or it's difficult to reconnect them because there's the old superglue in the way. I mean, my kids created this giant starship with Lego when they were older elementary. And they were so concerned about their little cousins coming over and their little brother messing with it that they thought, let's just super glue it so that it won't come apart. Problem is, cousin came over, it got pushed off the side of the dresser, smashed into a million pieces, and suddenly it was impossible. I mean, not impossible, but it would have taken far too long for them to remove all the super glue from it and to figure out a way to do that. And it was set in grooves, so it would have been, they didn't even know how to do it. So ultimately, it was a very short-lived gift. And what seemed like a good idea at the time, let's keep it together, it didn't work. Super glue is something you don't want to mess with, as evidenced by the Gorilla Glue girl. Now, how many of you have seen this online? She's to the bottom left. She got onto Facebook and was so frustrated and scared because she had used Gorilla Glue instead of hairspray and was not able to get it off her head. She panicked and tried to use water. Water only made it worse. Her follicles of her hair were being pulled at. She wasn't able to sleep. She was getting massive headaches. It was bad. And so she got onto Facebook, asked for help. A surgeon helped her out. But in the process, she lost a lot of her hair and parts of her skin, her scalp. It all grew back. But her big message was, don't mess with superglue. It's neuroscientists who call superglue hormone oxytocin just that. And my message to people is, don't mess with superglue hormones. They are values neutral. They don't tell you if who you're bonding with is a good idea or not. But they're amazing. Oxytocin is called the love, cuddle, forget hormone. It causes relaxation, fearlessness, trust, and contentment. It's wonderful. Most people have heard about it in conjunction with childbirth or nursing. So when a mother gives birth to her child, she gets a cascade of oxytocin through her system where she is just in love and she's bonded. That child has caused a great deal of pain, usually, almost always, to that woman. And maybe she's been in pain for days, but the moment that child is put in her arms, she is like, oh, how beautiful is this baby? And everyone else is looking at like, ooh, wow, it looks like Yoda with slime. Now, I thought all my sons were stunningly beautiful. And then I look back on some of their baby pictures going, oh dear, what? How did I not see that? But it was the oxytocin talking. I was connected. And women will say things like, let's have another to their spouse when just a couple hours before they were saying, don't you ever touch me again. Like they're in so much pain and agony, they just want it to stop. I talked to a doctor who delivered 5,000 babies. Yeah. And I said, is this legit? Early on, I'd done my research. I said, I want to share this in workshops, but I want it to be factual. And he said, every time I see a woman, unless she's been knocked out, to just experience this rush of emotion and love for this child. It's crazy. And the forget hormone, she's forgotten how much pain that's involved often until maybe a couple of weeks before she gives birth again. And she's like, no, I don't want to get that. I don't want to get that experience. Can we just skip it? Can we just get the baby in my hands? It's called the cuddle hormone because as she cuddles that child skin to skin, as the father cuddles that child skin to skin, they get a dose of oxytocin, as does the baby. As in nursing, it goes back and forth. It's a wonderful thing. But this oxytocin is the same hormone that you get as you engage in physical intimacy. As you head down the line, remember that physical progression line that we used in the last video for the relationship triangle. As you head down that line of progression, you get more and more oxytocin. And the greatest dump is at a sexual experience. Any kind of sex, whenever one person's body touching another person's genitals, skin to skin in a pleasurable way, oxytocin. And if somebody has been sexually abused, 1 out of 3 Canadian women, 1 out of 5 Canadian men have been sexually abused. They're not experiencing dopamine, they're not experiencing oxytocin, they're not bonded. So they do get to seek help as soon as possible. So important, so that their future is not determined by their past. And I so appreciate that this is a delicate topic for so many, and that's why we don't treat it lightly. When the media suggests sex is no big deal, but it's the biggest deal, they're missing the point, aren't they? All right, the love, cuddle, forget hormone. Cuddle, interesting. Here's a study that's been done over and over and over again. A 20-second cuddle. That's a long time. Like if I saw you and knew you well and you were my really good friend, I might hug you if I saw you in the street 1,000, 2,000, maybe 3 seconds, but 20 seconds? Oh my goodness. After about 10, to be like, Darlene, are you okay? What's going on? Somebody get her off me. 20 seconds is a long cuddle. But let's say it is a 20-second cuddle. Could be, you're comforting somebody, but it could be a snuggle on the couch. It could be a slow dance, right? And what studies have found is a 20-second cuddle will give a woman enough oxytocin in her system where she will start to trust that person, whether they're trustworthy or not. It's a values neutral hormone. See, relaxation, fearlessness, trust. Why did I say women? Why not men? Because both men and women receive oxytocin, but at different amounts. If a man receives this much oxytocin in his system when he's having sex, a woman will receive 10 to 100 times more. 10 is the minimum, 100 is the maximum. Wait, what? I can't tell you the shocked faces I get when I share this. I've had one woman throw a pen. That's not fair. Another woman she also threw a pen. She said, why was I never told about this? Why aren't we taught about this? Yeah. So oxytocin tells you this person is trustworthy and you're bonded like super glue. Whether it was a one-night stand, a 1-hour stand, whether it was I don't know if that's a thing, if they call it that, or whether it's marriage, oxytocin is released if it's a consensual experience. And to illustrate it, I'm just going to pull in my handy dandy little hearts that I pull out. And because I've had negative experiences with super glue, I use my glue gun. And I have this couple thinking sex is no big deal, but the biggest deal, going ahead and, I got some on my table. See, I can get in trouble with glue, my glue gun. And they have had sex, right? They think it's no big deal. Let's say last night in my hometown, in a high school class, 2 students said, you know what? I don't want to go into university without having sex. They're concerned because it's the biggest deal and they don't want to look inexperienced. By the way, I want to just stop and say, if that's you, if you're thinking, I don't want to be inexperienced, I have never met a man or woman who said, man, I wish my partner was able to compare me to all the other partners they've ever had. I've only met people who are like, man, I'm so appreciative that, my spouse is a specialist on me and nobody else. I've met people, actually 70% of teens, this is in a study, will say that they regret having sex outside of marriage. And that was the teenagers that were responding to this survey. So there's a lot of people that will say they regret it. I have never met anyone who said they regret waiting for marriage. That's just my experience. And I know I'm not everybody, and I'm not a researcher. I don't have any studies out there, but all the studies I've read kind of match with that. That people, and a lot of times it's a perception thing. People will like, I want to be experienced because I want to make this a great moment for my partner. The thing is, if somebody actually loves you and respects you, if you can trust them, then you can experiment together. Like it doesn't, yeah. Anyways, it's just my little side. So here's the two hearts. And these two students that thought, you know what, we need to have sex because it's no big deal, but it's the biggest deal. And they go ahead and have sex. And the next morning, the guy walks into class looking around. He has dopamine in his system. He does not know that he has oxytocin in his system that has bonded him to that person. He doesn't know that he has a chemical imprint in his brain that will be there for the rest of his life. Nobody's told him. He walks in, goes and has a conversation with somebody else. Sex was great. He could do that again with anyone. But the 10 to 100 times experience that the girl had, she's walking into that classroom going, where is he? We need to talk. We need to talk about this. And then all of a sudden she's looking over, he's talking to another girl. And they're laughing. What are they laughing about? Are they talking about her? And all of a sudden she's all panicked and what's wrong with me? Oh my goodness, I'm one of those really clingy people. And her friends see her in distress, come on over. And she goes over to talk to them and they're like, what's going on? She says, oh, well, that guy, no, I know men, idiots. And so he's like, what? Nobody told her that she was going to get bonded 10 to 100 times more. And even though this wasn't a relationship, as in they said, let's be boyfriend and girlfriend, that one experience bonded them. What happens when you break a bond of super glue and you've got kind of tender hearts? Well, I've handed this out to many students, and usually someone will take it, but every once in a while, no one will. I was in a nursing class a couple of years ago, and nobody took the hearts. And I said, come on, just somebody break them up. Like the movies, it's no big deal. And they help each other out on other dates with other people. They stay best friends. It's awesome. And they all just kind of sat there looking at me like, that's not real life. And after a long pause and me waiting, a woman from the back of the class said, well, if no one will take it, I'll do it. She came forward. She said, here. And she didn't even try to separate these two because we knew what would happen. She said, I'll show you what it's really like to break up. And there was crickets in the room. Hush. Okay. It was obvious that she had experienced a breakup, and it wasn't fun. Breakups are not fun. Tell that to the girl with the super glue in her hair. Trying to separate is not an easy thing. And this also helps people who are just like, I don't know why I can't get over this. People are saying, just get past it. It's not that easy. Oxytocin is a powerful, powerful hormone. And so women get more of oxytocin. Guys, they get more vasopressin. It's also a bonding hormone that is values neutral. Interesting quote here about the hookup culture. This was from Donna Freitas. In Sex and the Soul by Boston University's Donna Freitas, 41% of sexually active college students use these words to describe last night's hookup. Awkward, used, dirty, empty, regretful, shamed, alone, miserable, disgusted, and duped. Could go on. Maybe it wasn't really sex at all, just an exchange of body fluids. But even if it's an exchange of body fluids, you would think then it's no big deal, but then why feel the shame afterwards? And the reason I use the word shame is because there's that song by Chandelier, by Sia, right? She says, I'm going to swing from a chandelier. 1, 2, 3, drink. She goes, I'm the girl for the good time call. And phone's blowing up. They're ringing my doorbell. Here comes the love. Here comes the love. But then she talks about the sun comes up. I'm a mess. Here comes the shame. Why? Why would she feel shame? She's the good time girl. She's the girl that guys call to, or people call to just have fun with. Sex should be just fun. And yet she feels this part ripping. As I talked about the guy on the ferry saying, how come I feel so hollow afterwards? Because if there's not that foundation of commitment, the brain, the heart, they're going to kind of go into a state of, wait a second, what's going on here? Sex always, oops, sorry, that's a mess. Sex always changes things. These are good news hormones for lifelong relationships, but these are bad news hormones for the relationships that don't make it. When we look at how breakups affect people, the songs are everywhere, right? Taylor Swift's song, she made a lot of money on breakup songs. And then, of course, Olivia Rodrigo, You Said Forever, Now I Drive Alone Past Your Street. It's interesting how oxytocin can also override people's common sense about things. Remember that Taylor Swift song, Trouble, Trouble, I knew it was trouble when he walked in the room? Well, that's makes sense because a woman's red flags naturally, unless there's been abuse in the background, are pretty high. And when you combine oxytocin with estrogen, those flags are actually shut down. So if that young woman who says, oh, here he's trouble, but allows him to cuddle on the couch, kiss her, hug her, dance slow together for long periods of time, the oxytocin overrides the common sense. I shouldn't call it common sense. It's not common sense. Overrides the red flags that are saying, hey, this is not a good person for me. This is a tough slide to show you, but it's essential. Because sometimes we think, oh, well, girls have it rougher when the breakups happen then, because if it's 10 to 20 times more oxytocin, well, then they're 10 to 100 times more devastated. But in fact, teens are 3 times more likely to struggle with depression as those who are not sexually active. This is the emotional cost of sexual activity. And when they studied them for both male and female, they were 3 times more likely to struggle with depression. Why? Well, the studies don't tell us the why. But if you understand oxytocin, well, possibly it's because the trust that is expressed in the oxytocin does not match the commitment that's being given in actuality. And there's a state of feeling incredibly vulnerable. Never mind what happens when there's a breakup or the person doesn't continue the relationship. The rate of suicide attempts for sexually active girls, this is one of the most famous studies for ages 12 to 16 years old, is 6 times higher. And guys are more than 8 times as likely to attempt suicide. So the idea that guys aren't as negatively impacted as girls, that's just not accurate. It just doesn't match. So what I like to tell people is anything valuable is worth protecting. We go to great lengths to protect our money or our iPhones. We protect our faces in Canada with hockey masks and our brains. What about our hearts? Like, how are we taking care of our hearts? I think it's important to understand the emotion behind this female university student when she said, why did they tell you how to protect your body from herpes and pregnancy? But they don't tell you what it does to your heart. This is a quote from the Medical Institute for Sexual Health. When an individual chooses to engage in casual sex, breaking bond after bond with each new sexual partner, the brain forms a new synaptic map of one-night stands. This pattern becomes the new normal for the individual. When and if the individual later desires to find a more permanent partner, the brain mapping will have to be overcome, making a permanent bond more difficult to achieve. Wow. I met a woman in Florida. She came up to me, and I only share stories where I get permission from people to share. She said, this explains why I have struggled so much in my marriage. I said, tell me. She goes, my husband, he actually decided to wait till marriage. He's gorgeous. He's funny. He's amazing. He understood that it was actually a big deal. So he decided to wait. I didn't. Before I knew him, I had multiple sexual partners and boyfriends, and it was just the norm. So I essentially connected, broke up, connected, broke up, connected, broke up, and my brain learned to prepare to break up. Like our brain learns to protect us. It's like, oh, you're going to be breaking up. I won't allow this attachment to become very deep and strong. So she said, the first 5 years of our marriage, I have struggled because I keep looking over his shoulder for the next guy, even though my husband is incredible. Like, he's amazing. And our marriage is amazing. But it's like my brain is preparing for the breakup. And now I understand. It has been trained to connect, break up, connect, break up, connect, break up. So even though a woman gets 10 to 100 times more oxytocin, if a man has trained his brain to connect and stay connected, he could be, like her husband is, more connected than she is. So she said, so I'm going to go see a counselor and I'm going to go retrain my brain. I love this. I love knowing this. This is fantastic. What we get to understand is that sex is powerful, right? Like, where do you want to see this? In the Okanagan, where I live, we are surrounded by mountains that are covered in trees. And so many years, we've struggled with forest fires, sometimes losing hundreds of homes at a time. Thankfully, no one's lost their life in recent years. But we take fire really seriously. So when I ask people in the Okanagan, where do you want to see this? They're like, well, in the fireplace. Oh, do we still have fireplaces? Absolutely. We have candles, we have furnaces. We love outdoor fire pits, but we keep our fire in the fire pit. And we're always sad when there's a ban on fires outdoors, but we understand because we do not want to see a firestorm in our neighborhoods. So while we respect the power of fire, while we respect the power of fire, we respect the power of sex as well. Inside a loving, lifelong, loyal relationship, sex can be amazing. Just like we love our fires and our fire pits and fireplaces. They're amazing. We love it. But just a little bit of fire outside of those areas can cause a lot of devastation. Just like a little bit of sex outside a loving, lifelong, committed relationship can cause a lot of pain in people's lives. So it's not about being negative about sex. It's about being respectful about the power of it. And so this might be a good illustration for you to help others with. So what? So what does this mean? Well, there's some amazing studies out there. One of them is from the University of Illinois. Those who wait to have sex in committed monogamous relationships report to having the highest amount of sexual satisfaction. What? And this is a University of Indiana study. I'll put it up bigger so you can see it. Older men rated the satisfaction of their sexual life over their lifetime. The highest rated were with one partner. The ones with the most partners identified themselves as the least sexually satisfied. The higher the number of sexual partners for men, the lower the amount of sexual satisfaction. Wow. That goes back to how we train our brain, remember? Neural pathways or neural ditches. So what if some of the things that you believe about sex are just not true? What if it's time to actually stop and do some understanding? We joke about sex. People sing songs about sex, movies about sex, but do people stop and think, okay, what is the purpose of it? How does it affect us? It looks like there's a bonding that happens that is not something to be taken lightly. So what do we do with all this information? I think I need to pause, take a break, and then we'll do our last video for a bit anyways. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you soon.